in China. And he was carrying or pulling his ox with him. And fortunately for you and me, he went to the Hangku Pass. He was going out into the desert to retire. He was 81 years old, and he was fed up with the political scene of the time. What do you think? What do you think? So fortunately for us, when he got to the Hangku Pass, a gatekeeper knew him and said, "Oh, great master, I know who you are. You're Lao Tzu. You are the king's sage. Would you write down your wisdom?" And fortunately for us, he said yes. So he sat down, he used 5,000 Chinese letters that are no longer in use, and he wrote 81 verses. It was a very tiny book, and this tiny book is the second most popular book sold on the planet next to the Bible. I started studying Taoism about 10 years ago, and I have been through the 12-step program, certainly Science of Mind. I've been a religious science minister for a very long time, and studying all these different philosophies. But when I embraced Taoism, something happened inside of me. So about 2 years ago, about a year, maybe a year and a half ago, I started to think, I want to write another book that combines my 12-step, my Science of Mind, all the studying that I've done, also neuro-linguistic programming with my hypnosis, and Taoism. And I want to do it, I want to create it with less than 100 pages, because the average American only reads 26 pages in a 200-page book now. Some of you are like, that's me. That's me. So I thought, I really want to create a book that is simple and easy like the Tao, and so I did. It's less than 100 pages, and I'm very excited about it. So it's called Trio of Treasures, Embracing the Wisdom of the Tao. Before we get into the treasures, I'd like to get into the trio of troubles. Now the energy just went clunk in this room. I promise you we'll bring it back up. Trio trouble number 1, rushing. When Sarah walked into my office one day, she was exhausted, she was in a hurry, she was stressed out, and she flopped down on my couch and she said, "I just need 30 more minutes a day, just 30. And I looked at her and I said, "You don't get 30 more minutes a day. You cannot buy, borrow, beg, or steal 30 more minutes a day." Like the rest of us on planet Earth, in a 24-hour period, we only get 1,440 minutes, and we get to decide how we are going to spend that. How many of you in the last, it's been interesting being in Anchorage, coming from Denver. I come from Denver, and the energy is very different. People move a little bit faster in Denver, but you guys are still moving pretty fast. How many of you in the last month have either said or heard someone say, "I feel crazy busy"? A few, right, at least half of you, at least half of you. Well, that's because there's a new epidemic in America, and it's called the crazy busy syndrome. It is serious, it's life diminishing, and it can destroy relationships, careers, finances, and most importantly, it can destroy health. According to USA Today, Americans need 42 hours a day to complete their to-do list. Philosophy professor Al Gina calls this the everyday-a-thon. Americans are overworked, overscheduled, and exhausted. Robert Kahn he wrote The Superman Syndrome, said, "Technology is forcing Americans to live at speed, but not at depth today." According to experts, the culture of America has the same symptoms as a child with ADD. Isn't that interesting? So life is really not speeding up, but it appears as though it's speeding up, and it's very serious. What happens? We've all been in the age of information, right? And we know that a lot is coming at us. Well, we're actually moving out of that, and what we're going to be hearing more and more about is the age of inattentiveness. Isn't that interesting? It's a very, very serious condition because we're not paying attention to what's important to us. Anyone have any idea what has sped up our lives or appeared to sped up our lives? What would it be? You know, while you're thinking about, I just remembered. Wait, I got to make a phone. Do you mind if I make a quick phone call? I forgot. I got to call my assistant because I forgot to tell him to send out the contract. Let's see, what did I do with my phone? Where's my phone? What? Oh, here it is. Okay. Oh, so what is it that sped up our lives so much? Don, I'm wondering if you could help me here. Could you hold that? Would you dial my number for me so I could call my assistant? 720 88. Oh, it takes way too long. Yeah. So, right after Steve Jobs died, what did I do with it? Right after Steve Jobs died, I read an article that said the smartphone, and I'm not recommending that we do this over this, but the article said that this will be considered the greatest invention next to the fire, in that it has influenced humanity more than any other invention. How many would agree? Isn't this amazing? Now, I get to carry this all over the country. I sent this up in a box by itself. This weighs 4 pounds, and it takes 11 seconds to dial my phone number. In the old days, how many remember this? Oh, so many of you. You want to guess what year this is? 64. 63. Yeah. So I'm certainly not recommending we go to that, but when we would dial the number, we would all take a deep breath, would we not? It would give us a chance to go, in all honesty, I do not know my children's and my husband's phone number. I don't need to. So, 7 billion people on this planet. That's more now, 7.2. 4.2 billion have cell phones. 3.2 billion have toothbrushes. Wow. Think about that. The great modern philosopher Lily Tomlin once wrote, "For fast-acting relief, try slowing down." The second trio of trouble is judging. A young couple bought a new home, and their breakfast nook overlooked the neighbor's yard, and every morning the neighbor would come out and hang her clothes. And after a while, the wife was going, God, look at this. Her clothes are always dirty every morning. I mean, this went on for day after day after day after day. About 2 weeks into it, the newlywed couple sat down at their breakfast nook, and the wife said, oh my God, look, her clothes are finally clean. And the husband very gently tapped on her hand and said, well, honey, that's because I cleaned our windows last night. The second trouble is judging. Judging is as common as leaves growing on trees and is as devastating as driving under the influence. To judge is to speak or to harshly act towards someone, and especially oneself. Judging is expressed by name-calling, backstabbing, whispering at the water fountain, or rolling of the eyes. And perhaps the worst form of judging is in sarcasm. Sarcasm is the lowest form of communications, and it's devastating to a child's ego. Judges perceive life through the consciousness of a victim. Victims perceive life as good and bad, right or wrong, black and white. Lynn Massey, the author of I'll Be Here Tomorrow, a good friend of mine, says that people judge other people by their behaviors and themselves by their intentions. And I hear this all the time in my office. I didn't mean to hurt you by my action. Well, and my response is, but the impact of your action hurt. So we have to take some time and to ponder our own behaviors. Certainly there would be more kindness on this planet if instead we would analyze our own behaviors and leave the others to their intentions. Let me show you what happens when judging happens. Here's two people. They have a relationship and they connect. And there's a snide comment, or there's a judgmental comment, or there's a sarcastic comment, or there's nothing left. I'll clean it up after. Trio of trouble number 3. How many of you have ever experienced someone trying to control you? How many of you have ever tried to control someone? Be honest. Yeah. And as I hate to say this, as Dr. Phil would say, how's that working for all of us? When I ask the questions, the energy of the room just drops, and no one likes to be controlled, and no one likes to control. It's not our nature to do so. Controlling another human being always, and I'm putting that in bold and underlined, always creates conflict. It takes the arrogance of the ego to try to control. The Chinese term for arrogant ego is qiang, and it means headstrong, self-righteous, stiff, and rigid. I know in my times of trying to control, I get... So what drives the need to control is fear. The voice of fear is harsh and intense. Controllers are conditional thinkers. They can think something's going to go wrong in a split of a second. Conditional thinkers think outside, look to the world for the answers, and see lives in pieces. Tao thinkers, or non-controllers, trust the process and see everything as the unfolding situation, unfolding of life, that there's no good and no bad, no right, no wrong. Life just is unfolding, and along the way, when we have our tough times, let's hope that we get the learning and we stay tender with ourselves, because that is the practice. The most famous Tao metaphor is water. Lao Tzu reminds us that if we are like water, water is humble, it's flexible, and it's trusting. Lao Tzu had a special understanding for the peace and the joy of life, and his metaphor around water reminds us to stay flexible, humble, and soft. Okay, so now take a deep breath. We're done with the trio of troubles. 5,000 years ago, the ancient sages of India used to say, and I so believe it's true today that my entire work is based on this, that a human being only has 2 desires. And these 2 desires are a peaceful mind and a joyful heart. Doesn't that kind of feel good? I mean, we think we want all this stuff in the outer world, but what we really want is a peaceful mind and a joyful heart. So let's look at trio of treasure number 1, simplicity, keeping our lives simple. Speaking of Steve Jobs, he wrote, "That's been one of my mantras." Did you know he was Buddhist? He studied Buddhism. "That's been one of my mantras, focus and simplicity. Simple can be harder than complex. You have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple. But it's worth it in the end, because once you get there, you can move mountains." To live simply means to be in the flow without journeying too far from our natural center point. To simplify is to just embrace the center point between action and inaction. If we are overly active, we have to come back and do nothing and then rest afterwards. If we are doing nothing and resting afterwards, most of the time we have to get more active. There's a wonderful word in Sanskrit. I used to have it on my car when I lived in Portland, Oregon. And the word is sama, S-A-M-A. It's an ancient Sanskrit word. And it literally means the center point between ease and effort. So again, if we're efforting too much, we need to ease. If we're easing too much, we need to effort. And Taoism teaches how to be in harmony with our own natural self. And that's what we are here to learn and to do. And when we learn that, oh my gosh, our lives just fall into place. Taoism is the ancient philosophy. It's actually a philosophy that is 5,000 years old. But Lao Tzu brought it to the world 2,500 years ago. It's the ancient philosophy of balance and harmony. We are meant to live in harmony. And it is based on the concept of yin and yang energy. Are you familiar with the yin and yang energy? The yin is the feminine, the yang is the masculine. And we are all both. It has nothing to do with what our physical equipment is. It has everything to do with our yin, soft, creative, curious energy, along with our yang energy that takes us out in the world and go, here I am. This is what I'm going to do today to uplift the consciousness of humanity. We can really only do that when our lives are simple. Simplicity. Lao Tzu writes, sometimes things are ahead and sometimes they are behind. Sometimes breathing is hard, sometimes it comes easily. Sometimes there is strength and sometimes there is weakness. Sometimes one is up and sometimes one is down. Therefore, the sage avoids extremes, excesses, and complacency. Trio of treasure number 2, kindness. Leo Buscaglia, who was the first professor to teach love at a university, I believe he taught it at UC, actually I think it was Stanford, and he went and got permission to teach a course on love, and the people said there, no one's going to come to your class. And he filled auditoriums, he once wrote. Too often we underestimate the power of a touch, a smile, a kind word, a listening ear, an honest compliment, or the smallest act of caring, all of which have the potential to turn a life around. Human beings do 2 things all day long, and these 2 things bind us as a human race. We all breathe, and we all think. According to science, and this is so exciting now because science and philosophy are coming together. According to science, we think 70,000 thoughts in a given day. Isn't that amazing? According to research, 80% of those 70,000 thoughts are negative. Wow. According to research, 80% of the 80%, this is according to Dr. Deepak Chopra, 80% of the 80% are the same ones we had yesterday. And we wonder why our lives are not changing. We are asked to think kindly. And somebody asked me the other day, of the trios, of the 3 treasures, which one do you love the most? I said, well, that's kind of like asking me, which of my 3 children I would love more. It doesn't work that way. However, I will tell you, if you do nothing else but transform any negative thoughts that you have about yourself and others into kindness, your life will change. Kindness recognizes that everyone is soul first, human beings second. Mother Teresa says, kind words can be short and easy to speak, but their echoes are truly endless. How many of you have ever been to Pike Place Market in Seattle? Oh, most of you. Okay, wow. So you know that it's an open-air market, right? And there's a lot going on, right? There's loud music, there's people, the vendors are yelling back and forth, and a lot is happening. Well, one day in 1984, I experienced the greatest act of kindness, and it was so pivotal in my life. I was there. I lived in Seattle at the time, and I was there because I took my father, who by his own admission had become a Skid Row bum, and he was living on the streets. I took him out to breakfast. And I remember thinking, this is a really sad, shallow conversation we're having. I just was so sad when we said our goodbyes, because he had given up on life. I thought, okay, well, as long as I'm here, I'll just go get some salmon. So I went into the fish aisle, and I mean, there was a lot going on, and I went up to a counter. It was about this high, and I remember thinking, God, the guy on the other side kind of looks like Santa Claus. He was big, and he had white hair, and he had a beard, and I looked at him, and I said, I'd like to buy some king salmon. And he looked at me and went, I'm sorry, miss. I'm sorry, I'm out. And I simply could not take one more disappointment in my life. And the tears just started to stream down my face. And he looks at me and he goes, Fred, throw me a king. We have a live one here. Oh my God. So this salmon comes flying over people's heads. He catches it, he wraps it up, he comes around the counter, and he looks at me, and he has it in his left hand, and he puts out his arm, and he says, young lady, you look like you need a shoulder to cry on. And I want you to know, the heavens opened up. I put my little head on his shoulder, and I sobbed. I'm like, I just had breakfast with my father, and I'm about to lose my home, and I'm separated from my husband, and my dog is dying. Oh my God! And the worst is that I'm in ministerial school, and I don't even think I believe in God. It's not a good place. Not a good place. And I said, the only thing I know is that I have two beautiful young sons, and I don't know what's going to happen. He just held me in the middle of Pike's Place. Are you kidding? So there's a phrase in Taoism that says, no storm lasts forever. So as my internal hurricane started to slow down a little bit, he stepped back and he looked at me and he said, young lady, I'll never forget his voice, I'll never forget his words. Sorry. Young lady, I really get that you're going through a rough time. But you're strong, you're courageous, you're going to get through it. Young lady, I want you to hear me on this. No human experience is bigger than God. Do you hear me? No human experience is bigger than God. Okay. Okay, if you say so, Santa. I want you to go home. I want you to love your sons like you've never loved them before. You're going to be just fine. So I went home. My sons were at Montessori that day. I went and got them. We went home. We sat on the living room floor. We played Legos all afternoon. I cried. I laughed. I slept. We all slept. The dog was there. I was curled up. It was great. It was a wonderful healing time. A week later, I went back. And I walked into his aisle, and he saw me, and I saw him. He was like, oh, wow. So he came over. He gave me a big hug. He said, well, young lady, you look a lot better this week. And I go, yeah, thank you. I said, so a couple of things. I've come to pay you for the salmon. And secondly, I noticed that there was a big blob of mascara on your shoulder. So I've come to pay for the chef's coat. And I have a box of chocolates for you. He said, okay. I'll tell you what we're going to do, young lady. You are not going to pay for the salmon. The coat's been washed, but I will take the chocolates. And he said, I want you to hear me on this. When you go out into the world, as you live your life, and you see someone at the airport, or you see someone at the grocery store, you see somewhere that needs a shoulder, a kind touch, a gentle nod, you go and give it to them. So we hugged, we said our goodbyes. I never knew his name, and I only saw him twice. And he lives so deep in my heart because he gave me an act of kindness that I desperately needed one day. And it changed my life. And he told me I'd be fine, and I believed him. Kindness. There's no greater spiritual act. Mark Twain once wrote, kindness is a language that the deaf can hear and the blind can see. So, let's see, where is it? Well, I have a gift for someone. It must be back in Don's office. That's okay. So, over the years of working with people, I have developed different products. But I think I have found the answer to help people manifest the life they want to live. It's pretty exciting. It's a journal. It's a 9-minute, 90-day challenge. We're going to start working on it tomorrow night. So from a space of kindness, one of you is going to receive a journal. Would you flip over your bulletin, and if you have a gold star in the top right, could you raise your hand and I will get you a journal? You got it, lady. Yay, let's give her a hand. Let's give her a hand. Yeah. You have a journal. So I hope if you're able to come to the class, great. If not, and no, that's not it. Yeah, thanks, sweetie. So it requires that we take at least 9 minutes a day out of our 1,440 minutes to change our lives and focus on what we want and to spend some time in kindness for ourselves and others. Trio of treasure number 3, allowing. Lao Tzu says, when you are content to simply be yourself and don't compare or compete, everyone will respect you. We don't live in a competitive universe. We live in a creative universe. There's nothing to compete. There's, in God's energy, there's nothing to compete, but to marvel at our differences and our beingness and to offer places of kindness when we need them and to keep our lives simple. So the trio of treasure number 3 is allowing. Taoism reminds you to just go flow with life and enter the mystery. Taoism is a down-to-earth guide to living life with grace. And with grace, you simply accept yourself. Now let me ask a very silly question. How many in this room have ever made a mistake? I mean, really. And how many of you have beat yourself up for it? So, stop it. We all do it. And by living life full out, you will discover who you are. We are here to make mistakes. Somebody said, what is the meaning of life? And I, in a little quippy moment, said, oh, we're here to make mistakes. And, really? Yeah, that's how we find our purpose and our love and our individual, and we grow into our magnificent self. So there are 81 verses in Taoism, and many scholars over the years have analyzed, dissected, given their opinions. It's been quite a dissected process. But every scholar agrees on the 25th verse. Every scholar agrees that Lao Tzu wrote the following. Great is boundless. Boundless is eternally flowing. Ever flowing, it is constantly returning to know the way, understand the great within yourself. I have come to believe that the greatest affirmation that you and I could ever say is, I come from greatness, I allow greatness, and I am greatness. So I want to give each of you one of these. Can the ushers bring these forward? We'll just pass this out. So while the wonderful ushers are doing this, I'd like you to just turn to the person next to you and go, "You are great. You are great. You are great. And you allow greatness. You allow greatness. And you are great." Okay. Put your hand on your heart, close your eyes, and repeat after me. I come from greatness. I allow greatness. I am greatness. Keep your eyes closed and let's go into the treatment. So in this very special day, where we each have 1,440 minutes to give, to receive, to live a life of flowing and trusting and flexibility and curiosity, we remember that the very source of our being is within each of us. It lives and moves and creates itself as us and through us and all around us. Without rushing, without judging, and without controlling. It just is. So let us surrender into that place that is so peaceful and so joyful. That place that is unscathed by any human drama. As we take our next breath, let us do so with kindness in our hearts for ourselves. Let us do so with a desire to be simple and humble, trusting. I come from greatness. I allow greatness. I am greatness. And so I welcome today. Whatever happens today is absolutely perfect. I welcome this day so that I may tell those that I love that I love them. I welcome this day so that I can be of service to humanity, to uplift the consciousness of humanity in my own special way. I welcome today so that I can love and be loved. I know that whatever's happening in anyone's life in this room, whether it's a major storm or just sheer joy, it's all God. For no human experience is bigger than God. And so we give thanks for our time together. We give thanks for this wonderful spiritual community that reminds us that our thoughts create our reality. That as we follow our hearts and trust our wisdom, we are led and guided to higher experiences of life. So we give thanks, the sweetest of all thanks. Together we say,
and so it is.
Thank you all for coming to my Tao party. I love you guys.